The Joshua Tree is clearly a classic record, but I'm not sure it's actually any better than All That You Can't Leave Behind. It simply came first, you know, so that's the one which had the shock of the new about it.
U2 had good reason to recruit both Eno and Lanois for their new millennial rebirth. Not only had both producers helped U2 become a global success in the 80s, but they'd also proven their ability to reinvent and reinterpret the group with 1991's Achtung Baby. Coming after the critically panned Rattle and Hum album and fusing electronica, dance and rock into something truly unique, Achtung Baby was the first indication that U2 could bounce back from their failures with bombastic fervour. When the team behind it reunited 9 years later for All That You Can't Leave Behind, the resilience and creative strength of the group became even more crystal clear.
When the night takes a steep breath and the daylight is nowhere, if I crawl.
It was obvious prior to that record's release it was going to be a key U2 record. It was going to be a safe record, a record that reminded people of the band's strengths. All That You Can't Leave Behind was a very successful restating of the U2 brand and what U2 can deliver both for long-term fans and a new generation of fans.
I think the album works incredibly well. I mean, it's an intriguing combination of U2 at their pop best, at their rock best, and also it's got its darker moments as well. So it's not just a happy poppy album, it's far more than that. It's got an emotional depth to it in many of the songs. There's a darkness in there that does come through on several of the songs. They're very reflective. There's a lot about death in there. There's a lot about death, rebirth, regeneration, hope, renewal, all those kind of things.
It has, if you like, a change of mood in the middle so that you feel that you're on an emotional journey rather than just simply a kind of repetition of a similar kind of mood. And then it takes you down, it kind of just lowers the energy levels a bit and becomes more reflective. So it leaves you at the end reflecting upon a journey that you've taken, an emotional journey. That's what albums, great albums, do, and probably what they should do. And I think is the album that U2 systematically set out to make. They set out to make, which is why they took their time, a classic album.
With the new album proving a huge success, in no small part due to the cultural ubiquity of Beautiful Day, the next single arrived in January of 2001. More introspective and with a darker tone than its predecessor, Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out Of acted as a tribute to the recently deceased In Excess vocalist Michael Hutchence. It would go on to become another fan favourite and win a Grammy Award in the process.
I'm not afraid of anything in this world.
Stuck in the Moment is a very good song. As a song, it's more R&B than a lot of what they've done. I thought that was a very, very emotive piece.
Bono's song for Michael Hutchence, his friend Michael Hutchence, who committed suicide, and he said, you know, it's a nasty little song because he was so angry and he was, you know, why are you such a fool? Why did you do this? This moment could have passed.
I'm not surprised that Bono would have Michael Hutchence on his mind, because I gave the eulogy at Paul Yates' funeral, and Bono was there. And we spoke about how we were both so saddened by her death. Michael Hutchence obviously got himself in a place where there were certain things in his head that he couldn't get rid of. And that destructiveness resulted in his death and was a contributing factor to Paul's death. And I think for Bono, this was a lesson that made an impression. And he couldn't get out of it unless he wrote a song about it.
Following Stuck in a Moment, the next single, Elevation, would return to more bombastic territory with a new remix, as featured in the movie Tomb Raider, giving the song a further uplifting edge.
U2 are big television fans, and I don't think it's just coincidence that Elevation is also, you know, the title of a song from the television celebrating Marquee Moon album. But if you look at the other lyrics in there, I mean, he uses the phrase I and I. It's a Bob Dylan song title. He uses I Believe in You. There's another Bob Dylan song title in there. And he does this again and again on that album. And after a while, I think it becomes almost an exercise in spot the song title that Bono's decided to use in his own song. And I don't know how, I assume this is unconscious. I don't think it's some kind of clever comment on Bono's part, you know, for us people to spot the song title. But I mean, in Elevation particularly, you know, there's just three just off the top of my head, and you know, I'm sure there are many others too. You know, I do find it quite odd. I mean, you could go through that entire album and it happens again and again, so it is quite strange.
You've got Elevation, which is about as near to rock and roll as U2's got since Desire, but essentially I'd like to think it's soul music. And the difference between, what soul music is soul music is about the decision to reveal rather than conceal.
Elevation was another Grammy winner for U2, as will be the follow-up single Walk On, a stirring tribute to Burmese dissident Aung San Suu Kyi.
Walk On is a song inspired by the Burmese dissident leader under house arrest, Aung San Suu Kyi, an inspirational figure to Bono. I mean, he loves inspirational figures, that is, people who are alone against the system. And you know, I think he feels a sense of solidarity, and he clearly responds to them, you know, as many people do. You know, whereas lots of people who aren't Burmese will go and picket the Burma embassy, you know, or write furious letters to their MP or congressman. He will write a song about it, and I think, you know, knowing that it's kind of more strength to her elbow to feel that there is support around the world, because, you know, what do oppressive governments try to do to their, you know, to their dissident figures? They try to make them feel isolated.
While Walk On, and indeed much of the other material on All That You Can't Leave Behind, was very direct in its subject matter, the inspirational tone of the music meant that listeners could easily adopt U2's message to their own circumstances. It was this element of the band's sound that would see the modern U2 become unexpected ambassadors for a new emotional consensus. While initially successful in America, the record had begun to flounder by August of 2001, dropping to as low as 108 on the Billboard Top 200 chart. Something was about to happen, however, a seismic political, cultural and social disaster that would see the American public yearning for comfort and hope.
Terrorists attacked the heart of America with catastrophic loss of life. Both towers of the World Trade Center collapse with thousands trapped. Another plane explodes on the Pentagon, mocking America's defensive might. In the streets, panic and the certainty that casualties are horrendous.
Following the events of September the 11th, bereaved Americans were seeking a spiritual optimism that had become increasingly rare in modern music. Music fans soon discovered these aspects in All That You Can't Leave Behind. As the album soared once more, U2 began to reciprocate the emotional response, imbuing their songs with fresh meaning and becoming that most uncommon of things, a band who well and truly reflected the era.
Heaven on earth.
I just think the album reflected the 9/11 experience in the sense of it didn't dramatise. It just dealt with songs of confronting death and offered hope. I mean, there's a lot of songs in there that confront death and then go on to offer some kind of hope or sense of renewal. And there's a religious aspect to it as well, I think. You know, songs like Grace at the end, which is the final song. You know, we get a bit of theology thrown in there too. So virtually every response from 9/11, from almost despair to the tragedy of death, to the hope for something better, to the righteous indignation, to the turning towards religion and a more meditative approach to the whole thing. That's all in there as well, and it's almost it's almost a compilation album of the 9/11 experience or something, if you've been flippant about it. But I mean, it's strangely prophetic in that sense, very present, very odd that should happen.
Songs like New York, which was Bono's tribute to people like Lou Reed and Frank Sinatra, took on new meaning after 9/11. It became a sort of New York survivors song, and celebrating the power of the city and the strength of the people and the sort of grit and determination of the people.
U2 had embraced America with heartfelt commitment, and they were now as big in the USA as they had ever been. Continuing a theme that had started 14 years ago with Rattle and Hum, U2 had now made their American cultural symbiosis a commercially viable prospect. This would further be highlighted by their new material. U2's second greatest hits package would include 2 fresh recordings. Electrical Storm, while popular around the world, would notably not set the US charts alight. The other new song, while not released as a single, would take U2's fascination with American culture to another level. Also featured on the soundtrack to Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York, The Hands That Built America serves as testament to the band's unique cultural grounding. Coupled with their Irish heritage, the geography behind U2 has become an increasingly ambiguous aspect of the band.
U2 did become an American band in a sense as soon as the Joshua Tree, and ever since that. They came from an Anglo-American tradition in their musical influences, and that's that's what they've continued to project on the world. It's difficult for me to imagine the idea of U2 doing a kind of Waterboys album or reconnecting with their Celtic roots. They are quite capable of doing that, but you don't get a sense that that's of particular interest to them. Although it's, I could have just constructed a future album there. I mean, they've done everything else, I suppose, in their world. Why not that? It seems almost too obvious thing for them to do, in a sense.
As well as redefining U2's sense of heritage, the events of the early millennium meant that many saw U2 as being inextricably linked to social and political issues. This would be something that lead singer Bono would capitalize on, using his global exposure to further his campaigning for charities and good causes. Since 1999, he'd been involved with raising awareness of third world debt, and in March 2002, met with President Bush to help unveil a $5 billion foreign aid package. 2002 also saw Bono set up the organization DATA, Debts, AIDS, Trade and Africa. While certainly not the first musical artist to become politically motivated, Bono has nevertheless redefined the terms of what such a campaigning celebrity can achieve.
The history of the relationship between pop and politics is a long way. I mean, it obviously starts with things like the folk music and the traditions of Woody Guthrie and others, and much earlier eras where people have used folk music to talk about their times and about the struggles they've gone through. Pop and rock took a while to adjust, I think, to that kind of potential.
Well, I think there's always been a two-part, kind of a double relationship between politics and music. Music was always kind of political in some ways, but it's always been moving into the commercial arena. Okay, so if you go back to the blues, and I mean, there's all sorts of relations between politics and music, but blues is protest music, right through to early rock and roll. As once a time when rock and roll was anti-establishment rather than its commercialised nature now, and right up through to punk and hip hop. There's always been an element of politics, but at the same time, there's also been this commercial, cultural industry element.
Pretty soon, it's going to be World AIDS Day. Something's going to happen on that day. The same thing that happened yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. 5,500 people, men, women and children, Africans, will die from this preventable, treatable disease. And they don't have to. For 30 pence a day, they could stay alive with these 2 little pills.
So you have this double political side of pop music, of music. One, a progressive and interesting and expressive side. Everything from punk to CNN, black CNN, as rap was called. But also this commercial side, where there's always the necessity to sell product. And that's political in a different way. It's kind of political economy, if you like. The need for performers and so on to get out into the market and get their fans to buy product.
People know the Irish rock star Bono as the frontman for U2. We've come to know him as well for his fight against poverty and disease on a global scale. We followed him to Africa months ago to see for ourselves. It's been a year since he started the big campaign based on the color red.
It's strange that musicians are in this position, and it's obscene even. But we are, and we are artists, as there were painters, as there were novelists, and as there were film directors. And there are very wealthy film directors. It does not take away from their ability to comment on an issue.
I think Bono has had an extraordinary impact. I mean, in the sense that he is clearly taken very seriously by very important and powerful figures. I mean, the Pope, Mitterrand, Blair, Bush, these people are willing to be seen in his company, indeed are keen to be seen in his company. And that's, just the part of it. I mean, the photo opportunities that is provided by Bono is clearly crucial. But what happens behind the scenes too seems to matter. It does appear, by all accounts, that Bono makes a difference because he's able to persuade political figures from a very wide variety of political backgrounds to change their mind, or at least to sign up to whatever campaign he's currently working on. He's obviously very articulate, very knowledgeable, and he's charismatic.